Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Quiet Fire. Today, I want to share something that's been on my mind for a little while, and that is the art of beginning again. As a lot of you know, I'm on a new chapter of life, kind of having moved to a new city, working out what post-grad life means. It's a new chapter in all kind of senses of that term, and that's something I really wanted to talk about today because it's not always that easy to start again. Especially when you think about what happens when you thought you already began again. When you've rebuilt and healed and moved on and gone through all of the things that happen when you kind of uproot your life or you start a new chapter, and then life kind of throws at all of you again and asks you to start over. Whether that's a new life chapter, a new city, a new job, or all of the above, starting again when you've already done the work of starting over is never easy. So today's episode is for the people who are tired of beginnings, the people who have picked themselves up more times than they can count, who are learning, maybe a little bit reluctantly, that growth is unfortunately not linear. There are ups and there are downs, there are steps forward and there are steps backward, and that healing loops back. That sometimes the restart you didn't ask for turns out to be exactly what you needed. So let's talk about the courage and the grief and the quiet hope of beginning again and starting over. So to begin, I want to talk about the story, the cycle that we're often told. At some point, you hit rock bottom, you have a breakthrough, you make a big decision, and then it's all up from there. But in real life, you start over. And then you lose momentum, and then you get distracted, or heartbroken, or scared, or bored, or just tired. And then somewhere down the line, you begin again. Starting over isn't a one-time event. It's a rhythm, it's a pattern, it's a thing that people go through again and again before they figure out where they're meant to be. Life is not and will never be just one reinvention. As people, we will continue to grow in every aspect of ourselves. And that's not finite, because at the end of the day, we are people who grow as the world moves with us. And I think it's so important to keep in mind that every version of ourselves becomes better as we go along. And if we don't go through the things that we need to go through, we're not going to be able to find those other versions of ourselves that we can fall in love with. And so the next thing I want to touch on is that you are not a failure for needing to restart. So I want to get this out of the way. Needing to begin again doesn't necessarily mean that you messed up. It doesn't mean that you should have known better, taken another path. It doesn't mean that the last beginning was fake or failed. It means that you're still becoming. That's it. You learned something you didn't know before. You experienced a chapter of your life that you hadn't experienced before, and hopefully you learned from it. Maybe it was a chapter you needed and always knew was going to end. Maybe the end of the chapter wasn't foreseen, but the world and the universe has brought it upon you that it is time for that chapter to have ended. Maybe you hit a wall, or you changed your mind, or you found some clarity in what you want to do with your life, and it's not where you were. Regardless of the intricacies of what that moment is for you, if you fell down, it gives you a chance to stand up again. That's not moving back. That's not regression, but that's resilience. That's getting the clarity of figuring out what your next steps are on your journey. I often think that life is somewhat like a game of snakes and ladders, because sometimes you will go through things and find the ladders and go up and skip all of the hardship. But other times you'll run into a snake and slither down, and it's not always easy, and that's a part of the reality that is life, is that sometimes you are taking steps backward that will ultimately propel you towards your goals and towards what's meant for you. So beginning again is also not something that needs to be dramatic. Sometimes it can just look like finally responding to the email that's haunted your inbox, going for a walk even though it's 4 p.m. and you haven't done anything productive, texting someone you haven't texted in a while, starting a new journal, admitting that something needs to change, or just deciding not to give up on yourself and actually do the things that make you fulfilled and make you feel like you. I feel like there's a misconception that we think rebirth has to be big, but often it's just choosing softness in a moment that usually you wouldn't choose, and choosing yourself when it would be easier to disappear. However, beginnings do come with grief. because every fresh start requires a letting go of the world that you lived in, the chapter that came beforehand, whatever it was, of what didn't work, of the person you thought you'd be by now, of the timeline that you had constructed and planned. And the grief doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong. It just means that you cared. And it means that you're paying attention. And it means, most importantly, that you were brave enough to try. So let yourself mourn the last version of that dream. Cry, rage, sit still, feel however you want to feel. But the grief and the emotion is part of the beginning. And so here's the beauty of becoming someone who begins again and again. You get to stop waiting for the perfect timing to do things. Because when you decide to start a new chapter, to start a new project, to start anew, you stop expecting the clean slate, and you get used to the idea that life is in chapters and not just one ongoing path. Getting used to that means that if you don't choose the right path now, you never will. And the things you choose now don't always equate to the things you get later. You can always make choices later. And it's never finite. And the things you choose now will not dictate the rest of your life. You can learn to work with what is and what's in the now, not what should be. You can begin again while still healing from the things that you've gone through, while you're still afraid, while you're still unsure. And over time, it stops feeling like a failure because you know it's coming. And you know how to pivot. And you know how to hold tenderness in a way that makes you feel fulfilled. And you're not afraid of the blank page and of starting again. So wherever you are right now, if you are on day one, or if you've started over 1,000,000 times and you're tired, know that it's okay. It's okay to feel like you're doing it all again and not gaining progress. But know that you are not behind or broken, because you are still here and still showing up and still brave enough to believe in the next version of you. And so maybe this new beginning isn't a step backwards. Maybe it's just a deeper becoming. So thanks for being here and for starting with me today. And I hope to see you all next week. With that, don't forget that you are amazing, you are loved, and I thank you for being here.